Imagine a wide, dusty valley. This was the valley of Elah. On one side of the valley, an army gathered. This was the army of Israel, led by King Saul. They stood on a hillside, their spears and shields glinting in the hot sun. On the other side, another army had set up its camp. These were the Philistines, fierce enemies of Israel. The two armies faced each other, ready for a great battle. But no one was fighting. Instead, a heavy silence hung over the valley, thick with fear and dread. The soldiers of Israel were not brave. They were terrified. Every morning for 40 long days, a giant came out from the Philistine camp. His name was Goliath. He was taller than any man they had ever seen, like a walking tower of muscle and bronze. His armor was so heavy that a normal man could not even lift it. He wore a bronze helmet on his head and carried a spear with a tip as heavy as iron. He would stomp down into the valley, his booming voice echoing off the hills. "Send me a man to fight," he would roar. "If he kills me, we will be your slaves, but if I kill him, you will be our slaves." King Saul and all his soldiers trembled when they heard Goliath's challenge. No one dared to step forward. Who could possibly fight such a monster? The giant's words were like poison, seeping into their hearts and filling them with despair. The army of Israel, which was meant to be the army of the living God, felt small and helpless. They would look at Goliath, then at each other, and shame would wash over them. For 40 days they did nothing but listen to the giant's taunts, their courage shrinking with every sunrise. The reward for fighting Goliath was great. King Saul had promised to give riches, and even his own daughter in marriage to the man who could defeat the giant. It was a prize fit for a hero, a chance to become famous and powerful in all of Israel. Yet even this incredible offer was not enough to overcome the terror that Goliath inspired. The soldiers whispered among themselves in their tents, their morale sinking lower and lower. The entire camp was trapped in a state of fear, waiting for a champion who seemed like he would never come. Far away from the tense valley and the quiet fields near Bethlehem, a young boy named David was watching his father's sheep. He was the youngest of 8 sons, and while his older brothers were soldiers in the army, his job was to protect the flock. David was not a soldier, but he was strong and brave. He spent his days playing his harp, singing songs to God and guarding the sheep from wild animals like lions and bears. He was just a boy, but his heart was full of faith. He knew that God was always with him, watching over him. One day, David's father Jesse called for him. Jesse was worried about his 3 oldest sons who were with King Saul's army. He had not heard any news from them for a long time. "Take this roasted grain and these loaves of bread to your brothers," Jesse said, "and take these 10 cheeses to their commander. See how your brothers are doing and bring back some news from them." So David woke up early the next morning, left the sheep with another shepherd, and began his journey to the valley of Elah. When David arrived at the camp, he heard a great shout. The Israelite army was lining up for battle, but he could feel the fear in the air. He found his brothers and gave them the food from their father. Just as he was talking to them, the giant Goliath stepped out from the Philistine lines. David watched in shock as the huge warrior began his daily taunts, shouting his ugly challenge across the valley. He saw the soldiers of Israel shrink back in fear, their faces pale and their eyes wide with terror. David could not believe what he was seeing and hearing. "Who is this Philistine?" he asked the soldiers standing nearby. "Who is he to defy the armies of the living God?" The men told him about Goliath's challenge and the king's reward, but David was not interested in the reward. He was angry. He was filled with a righteous indignation that one man could so brazenly mock God and his people. While everyone else saw an unstoppable giant, David saw a man who was standing against God himself. David's bold words quickly spread through the camp. Soon someone told King Saul about the young shepherd boy who was not afraid of Goliath. King Saul sent for David immediately. When David stood before the king, he spoke with confidence. "Let no one lose heart because of this Philistine," David said. "Your servant will go and fight him." Saul looked at David, a mere youth with no armor or military training. "You cannot fight him," Saul said sadly. "You are only a boy, and he has been a warrior since he was young." But David did not back down. He knew where his strength came from. He told the king about his life as a shepherd. "When a lion or a bear came and stole a sheep from the flock," David explained, "I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair and struck it and killed it." He looked the king in the eye, his voice steady and sure. "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Hearing the faith in David's voice gave King Saul a small glimmer of hope. Maybe this boy was the answer to their prayers. "Go," Saul said, "and may the Lord be with you." Then the king tried to help David in the only way he knew how. He dressed David in his own royal armor. He put a heavy bronze helmet on David's head and gave him a heavy coat of mail. He strapped his own sword to David's side, but the armor was too big and clumsy. David tried to walk but could barely move. "I cannot go in these," David told the king, "because I am not used to them." He respectfully took off the king's armor and set aside the sword. He would not fight like a soldier, because he was not a soldier. He was a shepherd, and he would fight with the tools he knew and the faith he possessed. He walked out of the tent, holding only his shepherd's staff. He went down to a nearby brook and carefully chose 5 smooth stones, placing them in the leather pouch he carried. With his sling in his hand, he walked toward the valley to face the giant. Goliath saw David walking toward him and he laughed a deep, rumbling laugh. He looked at the young boy with his simple staff and shepherd's bag and felt insulted. "Am I a dog?" the giant roared, "that you come at me with sticks?" He cursed David and promised to feed his flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. The Philistine army jeered, certain that this would be over in a moment. They saw a boy who had foolishly brought a toy to a sword fight, but David was not afraid. His voice rang out across the valley, clear and strong. "You come against me with a sword and spear and javelin," David shouted, "but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." He declared that this day the Lord would deliver Goliath into his hands. He said that the whole world would know that there is a God in Israel, and that God does not save with sword and spear. "The battle," David proclaimed, "belongs to the Lord." Then, something amazing happened. David did not wait for the giant to come to him. He started running toward the Philistine line, right at Goliath. As he ran, he reached into his bag, pulled out one of the smooth stones and placed it in his sling. He began to whirl the sling around his head, faster and faster, a blur of motion. He let the stone fly with perfect aim. The small stone shot through the air like an arrow and struck the giant right in the middle of his forehead, sinking deep into his skull. Goliath stumbled, his eyes wide with shock. He teetered for a moment, then crashed to the ground with a thunderous thud that shook the earth. He was dead. When the Philistine army saw their champion fall, a wave of panic washed over them. They turned and fled in terror. Seeing this, a mighty roar went up from the Israelite soldiers. Their fear was gone, replaced by a surge of courage and faith. They charged after the fleeing Philistines, chasing them and winning a great victory for Israel that day. David, the shepherd boy, had become a national hero, and his incredible journey to becoming king had just begun.